Howdy do! Today I'm going to run out of ink. This is the final video on my transcribing of the discarded image, but stay tuned for my next project, a little-known book beloved by both C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Contribute your guesses in the comments below. Back to C.S. Lewis. According to his letters, he wrote with a fountain pen as an undergrad, but switched back to a dip pen for the rest of his life. He hated typewriters and had his brother transcribe his handwritten letters and novels. During his studies, World War I broke out and Lewis enlisted. He's a combat veteran. I think we don't consider that enough when we think of him. However, if you look at bibliographies of classicists, that is, scholars whose work is dedicated to the classics of Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Arabic, there is a huge gap from 1914 onward in the monographs and articles on the subject. This is because most of the classicists joined the service, and most of them died. But when I think of Lewis and the trajectory of his life, I believe war put things in perspective for him. When he returned to England, he must have been like, fountain pens, funk dat. He liked to pause to form his words, and when you use a dip nib, you can only write 5 or 6 words at a time before you have to go back to the inkwell and dip it and resume. So imagine handwriting something in your journal, which is a process that's very different from making a journal entry on your computer, because you are forced to think more about what you're going to write next. You can't possibly handwrite as fast as you type, unless you're a very slow typist. Anyhow, but imagine putting an inkwell into that equation. Then you really slow down, and your words have a different shape to them. Your sentences do anyway. And so it's not just a matter of being able to think ahead. It lends a rhythm to your entire piece, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. Anyhow, I think it's really interesting that he was such a stickler for that. Oh, and after he had that epiphany, 20 years later, he became a Christian. Fun fact, did you know Lewis's spirituality before his conversion resonated most with the Old Norse mythology? But back to the dip pen. The act of stopping and starting as you dip the nib affords a sort of rhythm to writing, which is reflected in the sentences themselves. This is part of what it means to have good diction. I read somewhere that Lewis didn't like T.S. Eliot's work because it had no regard for diction and meter. It's funny how many of us today enjoy both authors. Anyhow, I'm about to run out of ink. Spent. I really gave it the old college try with this one because I was not only measuring the ink endurance by the milliliter for the pen itself, I was also trying to track, or I should say just measure, how much ink I was able to write after the ink window said I was empty. So right here I'm just starting my calculations, the before and after of what the cartridge weighed. And next, I'm going to show you what I found. It's math time. The pen I used was my Lamy Safari Charcoal Black Extra Fine Steel Nib pen. There it is, the beauteous nib. Or is it pronounced beauteous? I may never know. The ink was from Organics in the color L. Frank Baum. L. Frank Baum was one of my favorite authors when I was in 4th grade, and I devoured the entire series of The Wizard of Oz. I loved it so much. I think because it was so imaginative. There was a point at which it involved algebra pills. You could take a pill and know algebra. And I loved that so much because I was of the age then when many children start to wish that they could know all the languages. And of course, who doesn't want to know all the languages? But because of that series of books, I wanted also to know all the math. Anyhow, L. Frank Baum. It is a emerald colored ink, and I like it. It does ghost through a little bit, just a little, but I downgraded my paper quality toward the end, and I will talk about that next. The paper I started with was Mead reinforced college ruled filler paper, 20 pounds, and then I had to actually go to the first volume of my transcription. As you see here, there are 2, and when I started this endeavor over a year ago, I was using 5-star paper. You might be able to see that here. I don't know if the camera picks it up. And according to the internet, this also is allegedly 20 pounds in weight, but I can see a difference. It's not as thick, and the pen didn't respond to it the same way as it did with the Mead. There was, I don't think it was really feathering, it's just that it felt like the paper was absorbing the ink. And so I don't know if there's any kind of regulations on what you can call 20-pound paper. You know how like with food, nutritional information, you can get away with calling something fat-free if there's like a tiny bit of fat in it. Or makeup that says mineral-free. Guess what, boys and girls? There's no such thing as mineral-free makeup. If you have foundation that's mineral-free, you will, mineral oil-free, you will never, ever, ever be able to spread it across your face. It would just be a big clump. So, I don't know, maybe it's a vast conspiracy. I'm not sure. So, in the end, I was able to, let me back up. The way I measured this is I took the nib and the feed, this section, with the full cartridge, there's nothing in it right now, and I weighed that and got 5.49 grams, and then after, when I could write no more, I measured it again with all of these pieces to get a more accurate result. Not that it's very accurate, my scale only goes out 2 decimal places. So, my vague result is that I used 1.07 milliliters of ink. And with that, I was able to write 42.5 pages in all, with an average of 109 words per page, so that comes out to 4,632.5 total pages. You divide that by the actual ink used, 1.07, and you get 4,329.44 words per milliliter of ink. Not bad. I think the results would have been better if I were using better paper. And that's actually, that's kind of a dull statement because it's obviously true of anything. the better the paper, the better the paper, the less ink you'll be using. Anyway, so I want to now talk about the deception of the ink window. This ink window, let me see if I can turn it. See that? This here, this empty window, it's supposed to show you the ink level you have. Let me show you. Here, I've got ink in this. This is a Lamy All-Star. And as you see, there looks like there's one little drop there. I'm just about at the point where it appears to be empty. But look at the distance between this ink window and the nib. There is ink down in here. There's so much ink that I was actually able to write 13 pages after this window appeared to be empty. I was floored to measure that. I was floored by the result, I should say. So, if you multiply 109 words on average by 13 pages, that's 1,417 words that you can get after the window says you're out of ink. So now I thought it might be fun to do an actual calculation of the percentage. So, and this is my favorite way to do percentages, even though it's not really that quick. It's so visual, I love it. So, what percentage of ink can you use after the window says you're out? So, if I was able to write 13 pages, and my total page count was 42.5. Oh, hello, Minu. What's up, Putty Tat? Oh, no, your tail. Okay. Let's see if she'll just stick around there. I doubt it. So, okay, this is my favorite way to do percentages. 13 pages, and then the total pages I was able to write is 42.5. So if you think of 42.5 as the total, then you compare it to blank over 100. A percentage is always something out of 100. And so what you do is you multiply the, oh my gosh, what do you call that? Is that the denominator? Oh, I can't remember these words. I'm thinking so because it dominates. Or does it denominate? The denominator over the subominator? That's wrong. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I can't remember these words. Anyway, you multiply the number on the top by the number on the bottom here as in a diagonal. So 13 times 100, and you you don't have to make this, but is 1,300. And so what you want is for this number, if you multiply it by this unknown number, to equal 1,300. So let's get out the calculator, because I'm not dividing that by hand. I have done my service. Do you know, when I was a little kid, I used to do division with my fingers on my bed sheets at night to fall asleep. And I try to make them really complicated. That was a really stupid way to fall asleep, because it just stimulated my brain. Anyhow, 1,300 divided by 42.5 comes out to 30.588235 and a whole lot more. So let's say that that's 30.6. So that is the percentage. It's almost a third of the ink that you filled is left after that window is empty. That is crazy. So, unless you're really tired of your ink and you want to change it to a different one, and you want to use that ink window as a rationalization, I wouldn't ever use that window to mean anything. Although maybe I really don't think everybody in the world is on the same quest as me to find an economical ink that lasts for ages and ages. But anyhow, isn't that interesting? So next, let us do something fun. I'm done with the transcription. I am preparing my next book to transcribe. And so I thought I'd go over some of the vocabulary that I wrote in my little lexicon. I realized that there's so much of it that I couldn't possibly include it all in this video because it would be really long, and you know how it is. The TLDR, what would you call that? Is it an epidemic? Is it a way of life? Anyway, TLDR stands for too long didn't read. So I know, I'm self-aware enough that if anybody sees one of my videos that says that it's 56 minutes long, they ain't gonna click on it. They'd rather watch the 5-minute video. Anyhow, not that I'm complaining at all. I totally understand, and depending on the creator, I would follow that myself. So anyhow, in the interest of brevity, I picked 3 words. And they're just kind of fun. Words that I had never come across before. They're not particularly hard words, but conventual. This is not conventional, conventual. And that is a word that means relating to a convent. I very much hope I get to use that word in a sentence in conversation someday. And another word that I had never read or heard before, planetolatry. That is the worship of a planet or the planets. Again, a word I very much hope to be able to either use in conversation or use in writing. Have you ever had that experience where you're composing an email and you write a word and you say to yourself, I have never written that word before? It's kind of a fun day when you use a new word. Okay, now, this word is great. Malefic. And the word has evolved. I hate the idea of words evolving. The meaning has evolved. The word hasn't evolved. Has evolved to mean anything that bodes ill. But originally it meant anything having to do with Saturn and Mars, which were historically thought to have an unfavorable influence. And speaking of influence, that's pretty much what the discarded image is all about. It's about how planets and any kind of body in the universe has an influence on Earth. And the medieval model was one that, of course, we have discarded, but some of us still believe in influence. For example, and when I say believe in, I mean that we kind of accept it to be true. For example, we believe that the moon has its own gravitational pull and it affects our tides. And not only our tides, but it actually affects our land. Did you know that deserts have tides too? And so we can plan our day around high tide and low tide, but we can also plan our planting and mowing the lawn and cutting our hair. And I know this sounds so hippy-dippy, but if you try it, just try it. Have you ever noticed, like, say shaving, okay? If you shave your legs, shave your face, whatever, there are certain days that you can do it and you don't have to shave again for extra days, and then other times that you shave and you have to shave more more often, or you have to shave in a quicker period of time because the hair grows back quicker. And that has to do with the pull of the moon and the moon's influence that's pulling your hair out. If you look up the Old Farmer's Almanac, there are best days for just about everything in your life. The best day to dig a hole, the best day to start a diet, the best day to castrate farm animals. And it all is according to the moon. And I have myself been using this for trimming my hair, because I have very long hair that you will never see. And there's a time that you should trim it for it to grow longer, and a time to trim it for it to retard the growth. Oh. Sorry, that was my alarm to remind me to go to sleep. Pardon. Anyhow, so yeah, wow, I'm getting real personal here. Anyway, it works. I live by it. Any of you who are really perceptive, I guess, will note that I actually launched this YouTube channel at the exact minute of the full moon. Not that it so far has done anything for me, but anyhow, yes, influence. You don't have to have a medieval mindset to believe in influence, or planetary influence or cosmic influence. So, that is all I have for today. Until next time, long may your big jib draw.
Come thou fount of every blessing, to my heart